You?
Hi, everyone. Welcome, welcome. I'm Janet B. I've recovered from compulsive eating and bulimia and excited to be here. I always like talking about steps 6 and 7, just because the 12 and 12 has such rich material. So to put it in context, so we've taken a first step. We've admitted we are powerless, that this illness has kicked our butts. Our lives are unmanageable. We've done some work and we've come to believe that God, as we understand him, cares enough about us to restore us to sanity, that it's not just some formula, but that there is a loving creator who cares about us. And that when we do the work to get rid of the blocks between us and him, he restores us to sanity. So in step 3, we commit to do that work. In step 4, we identify our resentments, our fears, our character defects. In step 5, we admit them to God, to ourselves, and to another human being. And we start getting the beginning of those awesome promises, including the feeling that the drink problem or the food problem has disappeared will often come strongly. That means more than 50% of the time, we will be living in freedom. And it says, we feel we are on the broad highway, walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. It's quite a relationship. So again, page 76 of the big book just has one quick paragraph about step 6. And it says, are we now ready to let God remove from us all the things which we have admitted are objectionable? I think that's so beautiful because it's saying I've made a mess. I've created this big barrier between myself and God with my resentments, my fears, my defects, my harms to others. And God, who could just say, Janet, you made your mess, clean it up, says, Janet, you made your mess, but I'll clean it up because it's too much for you to clean up. So here we find ourselves at step 6. So let us go into the 12 and 12, if you have it, page 63. And on the first paragraph, it says, this is the step that separates the men from the boys. Like, okay, when we're ready to have God remove all these defects of character. And what does that mean? Well, they say, well, you're entitled to be called a man, or we'll say a woman, if we're sincerely trying to grow in the image and likeness of our own creator. That's the goal. Well, first question, what is the image and likeness of our creator? If I want to grow into something, I want to know what it is. And I think of some things that this book tells me. And I think of, I guess, one of my favorite on page 56, it describes God as infinite power and love. So that's my goal. Increased love for others, increased power over the obsession, that the obsession diminishes. And I would also like to think increased power to be of use, but infinite power and love. That's what we're trying to grow into. And so a person who's trying to recover, it says, usually says something like this. And Haya, could you read the last paragraph on page 63 that starts, sure, I was beaten.
Sure, I was beaten, absolutely licked. My own willpower just wouldn't work on alcohol or food. Change of scene, the best efforts of family, friends, doctors, and clergymen got no place with my alcoholism or compulsive overeating. I simply couldn't stop drinking or eating, and no human being could seem to do the job for me. But when I became willing to clean house and then ask a higher power, God as I understood him, to give me release, my obsession to drink or eat vanished. It was lifted right out of me.
Okay, so this is a really interesting paragraph here because it says, let's break it down. Couldn't stop, no, and realized no human power could help, became willing to do whatever it took, asked God to give him release. And then what happened? The obsession to drink vanished. It was lifted right out. So this is a little different of how it was explained to me. I went to my first OA meeting when I was a kid. I was 15 years old, but already I was beat. Um, I I was willing, but I was told, great, you admit you're powerless, you're willing, now stick to a food plan. Then once you've been on this food plan for 30 days and done X number of assignments, then, you'll be ready to like go and clean house. But that's not what it says here. Um, because if I come and I admit I'm powerless, and I remember thinking this, you guys tell me to admit I'm powerless, but then tell me I'm supposed to have power to stick to a food plan. And it doesn't make sense. And I'm sure people said I was like defiant, but I'm sure I was. But it doesn't make sense. And that's not what they're telling us. They're saying when we're willing to go to any lengths and we go to God, God removes the obsession. And I don't believe I'd read this when I had my experience. And this is how my experience went. So after 6 or 7 years going to meetings like that, being told to stick to a food plan because I was desperate, and being absolutely unable to, I finally found a group of people who like hadn't binged in years and years. And I said, I'll do whatever it takes. And I meant it. And I took the toughest sponsor around who I was like afraid of, but I just said, tell me what to do and I'll do it. So I was willing, but that's a start. But then I left the meeting. It's almost like a script. It's crazy, but this was my experience. I asked God for help. And my prayer went, God, I've always had fixed ideas of what you are like and how to worship you. And I'm willing to start over and let you show me what you're like and how to worship you. And became willing to do whatever. And if anyone has heard me tell my story, I said it was like a hand reached into my soul and yanked out the obsession. So we become willing, we ask, and then the obsession's removed. Now, at least lest someone say, well, this, it doesn't work that way anymore. We've all got to get, 38 assignments and write this. I was looking, I went to page 263 of the big book today and was looking how it was done back when Dr. Bob did it. And so here's this guy, his story is called, He Sold Himself Short. So he says, the day before I was due to go back to Chicago, it was Dr. Bob's afternoon off. He had me to the office and we spent 3 or 4 hours formally going through the 6-step program as it was at that time. The 6 steps were complete deflation, right? Admitting we're powerless, dependence and guidance from a higher power, steps 2 and 3, and then I guess 11 thrown in there. Moral inventory, or 4th step, confession, or 5th step, restitution, making our 8th step list, and then continued work with others in a few hours. And I look at this and I just say, shame on myself for all the times I've made it overly complicated for people. But I actually don't. I try to streamline it. It's like, okay, let's get to work. Let's start working on your step 1, your step 2. And generally I've found people can get through the steps in about a month, but Dr. Bob did it in 4 hours. So I need to cut down from 4 weeks to 4 hours. But I think the main point is, if we are expecting people to be abstinent before we show them how to get a relationship with God, we're not doing what the founders of this book did, in my opinion. So flipping the page, they're saying, okay, we got a perfect release from alcoholism. The second paragraph on page 64. Just, we went in, we became entirely ready, but it doesn't seem to work that way with the rest of our defects. And they start saying that it's not as, most of the others aren't life or death, the way that alcohol was to them, or the way that food was to a lot of us. The other defects aren't quite as extreme. And they start talking about drives, and they say, God made us that way. God made, it's normal to want, the basic drives, right? Sex or a relationship, security, and self-esteem. It says these are normal drives. And on the top of page 65, they say it is nowhere evidence, at least in this life, that our Creator expects us to fully eliminate our instinctual drives. However, this is where we get into trouble. Hi, can you read starting with since most?
Yep. Where are we? I just lost it though.
65.
Oh, that's why. Since most of us are born with an abundance of natural desires, it isn't strange that we often let these far exceed their intended purpose. When they drive us blindly, or we willfully demand that they supply us with more satisfactions or pleasures than are possible or due us, that is the point at which we depart from the degree of perfection that God wishes for us here on earth. That is the measure of our character defects, or, if you wish, of our sins.
So they make it really simple that we all have drives, but people like us, it's like we're in hyperdrive all the time, right? Our instincts drive us blindly, or we demand that we get more satisfaction or pleasure that's due us. So, for instance, I have had a lot of temptation to be controlling lately. And my 20-year-old daughter, okay, she's not in the house. She is going back to college. Classes start 3 weeks today. As of today, she is not, she does not have her classes picked out, and she does not have a place to live. So I see, okay, if I were doing, and so thank God, keep my mouth shut. But why am I agitated in the first place? Because I have an over demand for security. I'll feel secure if I know that she's all set for college. Well, it's not her job to give me security. It's my job to have security no matter what anyone else does. Or self-esteem. If someone thinks badly of me and then I get angry, like, oh, she, said that I'm rotten because I did so and so. The list could be very long. And then if I'm upset by it, it's because I have a hyperdrive with self-esteem. It's no one else's job to like me so that I'll feel good about myself. Now, it's normal to want it, right? We want to have friends. We want to know that our daughters aren't going to be sleeping in their cars when they go to college. But we can't have demands. And this is how we get into trouble. So it's interesting when we do our resentment inventories, we're asked to look at what's been affected, our relationships, our security, our self-esteem. It'd be nice if I knew my daughter was all set now, but either she will be or she won't be. And that's my work. So I want to actually skip through here and just real quickly do a very high level summary because the next chapter is so good. It talks about our different defects that we have and things to look out for. So I just want to mention them. And it says some of them we secretly love are defects. Who, for example, doesn't like to feel just a little superior to the next fellow? And isn't it true we like to let greed masquerade as ambition? Gossip barbed with anger is a polite form of murder by character assassination. Self-righteous anger lets us take comfort from the fact that many people annoy us. So aren't I just great? And then my personal favorite, procrastination, which is sloth in 5 syllables. So they just go through and they give us some defects to really look at and look at again. So we are posting on our website, recoveryjam.com, under other resources, a step 6 template. And so it's for people who've gone through the first 5 steps, identified their character defects. And if you want help, we have a character defects template. And on it, what some of us have found helpful is we write down our defects and how they manifest, and just for a few of them, like we pick our top 3, and then we pick ways we're going to counteract it. So for instance, my defect may be every morning, I'm tempted to ask my daughter if she's registered for classes yet or found a place to live that isn't her car yet. So my action plan for my ideal to combat my controlling might be to say the shut up prayer before I walk into her room. Beautiful prayer. This is how it goes. God, please keep one hand on my shoulder and the other across my mouth. So it may be to, to pray, to make a commitment to only ask her once every 3 days. So we make a little action plan, but again, we don't want to spend a lot of time on this because we want to get through to the end of the rainbow. We want to get through the first 9 steps as quickly as we can. So I'm going to flip to page 70, where it talks about step 7. Humbly asked him to remove our shortcomings. And Haya, can you read the second paragraph on page 70 that starts indeed, please?
Sure. Indeed, I can read indeed. Indeed, the attainment of greater humility is the foundation principle of each of AA's 12 steps. For without some degree of humility, no alcoholic or compulsive overeater can stay sober or abstinent at all. Nearly all AAs have found, too, that unless they develop much more of this precious quality than may be required just for sobriety or abstinence, they still haven't much a chance of becoming truly happy. Without it, they cannot live to much useful purpose or in adversity be able to summon the faith that can meet any emergency.
Okay, that's a hard paragraph. So let's look at that. It says first at the end, without humility, we can't summon the faith that can meet any emergency. So what they're telling me is that hard situations require more faith. Well, that makes sense, right? If I'm in a hard situation, I need to trust God more. But if I don't have humility, that's a block to my faith. So I was thinking about that. Well, how? They seem like 2 virtues, faith and humility, but how are they connected? And humility is saying, God, I don't have this. I don't have this all to myself. I don't have it all figured out. So that's what humility is saying, God, I need your help. And then it's like the perfect dinner guest comes in when invited, but only when invited. So it says that we all have humility when we start, right? A little bit. That's what step 1 is. I am powerless. This illness has me beat. I can't stop binging. So, but it says we need more, or we can't be happy. And if there is an emergency, we're going to be in trouble, because we would have said, yeah, God took care of my food. I needed him for that. But as far as the rest of my life, my career, my raising my kids, all that, I got it, God. It's okay. You go back to like making the planet spinning. And they're saying, no, we can't do that. And, then they tell us a bunch of other stuff that we really can't do that gets in the way of humility. And page 71, where it says, certainly, can you please read?
Sure. Certainly no alcoholic or compulsive eater, and surely no member of AA or OA wants to deprecate material achievement. Nor do we enter into debate with the many who still so passionately cling to the belief that to satisfy our basic natural desires is the main object of life. But we are sure that no class of people in the world ever made a worse mess of trying to live by this formula than alcoholics and compulsive overeaters. For thousands of years, we have been demanding more than our share of security, prestige, and romance. When we seemed to be succeeding, we drank and ate to dream even still greater dreams. When we were frustrated, even in part, we drank or ate for oblivion. Never was there enough of what we thought we wanted.
Okay, so they're really giving us 4 lessons here. Number 1, we don't deprecate material achievement. So we do not engage in Kardashian bashing, right? If there are people who want to, feel like they want to amass money and want to be prestigious, that's okay. We don't bash that. We don't sit there and say, oh, the people who all they care about is money are too shallow. We don't do that. It says, number 2, we don't debate with people who say that the reason we're here is to satisfy our natural desires. We've resigned from the debating society. It's okay if other people want to live their life that way. I'm not even saying it's a bad way of life. I'm just saying because I'm so sick, I need to live a certain way of life. Like, we're not people who are spiritually superior. We're people who started in the sandbox and need to work really extra hard on our spiritual life just to be on a level playing field. And it says, number 3, we can't demand more than our share of security, prestige, or romance. What's my share? However much God wants to give me. If you look at security now and you looked at it during, let's say, World War II, it's very different, right? Security now may mean I keep my good job. Security then might mean I get to keep my life. Prestige and romance, this program doesn't guarantee us good jobs or good husbands. It guarantees a spiritual experience, which is a relationship with God so earth-shatteringly wonderful that those things almost don't matter. Almost. We're human, right? And number 4, we're not supposed to keep dreaming still greater dreams. And what I think that means is we're supposed to be content. We're supposed to be content with whatever we have. And I love how they end it. Never was there enough of what we thought we wanted. Reminds me, right, of the Wizard of Oz. Her heart's desire all along was just to go home. So that's all, our heart's desire, probably the same, to keep our head in the clouds with God and our feet firmly planted on the ground where our fellow travelers are. And to be able to do that sanely without obsessing about food. In the next paragraph, they tell us that we are people who didn't realize that character building and spiritual values have to come first, that material satisfaction isn't the purpose of living. And on page 72, they say, yeah, sometimes we sought good character, but let's be honest, that was really a means to an end. I'll be nice so people will like me better. Not I'll be nice even if it means people won't like me. It says, seldom did we look at character building as something desirable in itself, something we would like to strive for, whether our instinctual needs were met or not. Then it says, we never thought of making honesty, tolerance, and true love of man and God the daily basis of living. So I think that's really what defines a spiritual life. If someone say like, oh, I'm spiritual, I live a spiritual way of life. Well, we should know what that means. But and isn't this a great definition? Honesty, tolerance, which means we can put up with a lot, right? We can tolerate a lot. Um, and true love of man and God. That's the basis of our living. Um, and because we didn't have, when we were in the illness, these values, we just had bad results. We just flitted along thinking, I got this, God. Yeah, maybe you take the food, but I got the rest. And they say, as long as we're doing that, I'm in the middle of the second paragraph there, as long as we're doing that, a working faith in a higher power was impossible. This was true even when we believe that God existed. We could actually have earnest religious beliefs which remained barren because we were still trying to play God ourselves. So they're saying we need a working faith. So not just a belief in God, it's possible to believe in God, but not have a working faith. And then it's totally irrelevant that we believe in God. If I'm a diabetic and I believe in insulin, but I don't inject it, it does me no good. So it's telling me I need a working faith, that I could have religious beliefs that are barren. And how are they barren? If I try to play God myself. And says, as long as we place self-reliance first, a genuine reliance upon a higher power was out of the question. And then what a cool line. That basic ingredient of all humility, a desire to seek and do God's will, was missing. So now they're giving us a recipe. I love this, humility. It's got a few ingredients. And they're telling us a basic one is a desire to seek and do God's will. That's it. What are the other ingredients in humility? Well, here's what I thought. Thinking of ourselves less, right? And thinking less of ourselves. Thinking of ourselves less, spending less time thinking about me, myself, and I, my favorite trio, and thinking less of myself, that trio isn't all that. And then added to that, a desire to seek and do God's will. On page 73, they say, so it is that we first see humility as a necessity, but this is the barest beginning. And at the end of that paragraph, it says, a whole lifetime geared to self-centeredness cannot be set in reverse all at once. Rebellion dogs our every step at first. I love that. It tells us, okay, yeah, this is going to be hard because we've been self-centered all our lives. And now we're trying to do it about face. And our spirits are rebellious at first. Guys, it gets easier because remember, this process is about God rewiring our hearts. And as he rewires it, we become more humble. So it gets easier to take that phone call when we don't feel like talking, to give up sleep, to give up time, to work with people, to be nice to people who are difficult. It gets easier because we get different. Okay, I'm going to flip to page 75, where they say something that isn't too fun. I'm on the fourth line in. It says, in every case, pain had been the price of admission into a new life. Right? None of us decided to work these 12 steps because we said, my life's going great. I think I'll work 12 steps to just make it a tad bit better. We did it because we couldn't stand living the way we were. But we said, okay, we got humility, and we soon discovered that humility was a healer of pain. So we begin to fear pain less and desire humility more. And it says, okay, what does that mean? What changes? And in the next paragraph, it tells us. And this is the fruit of starting to trust God. We begin to get over the idea that the higher power was a sort of bush league pinch hitter to be called upon only in an emergency. The notion that we would still live our own lives, God helping a little now and then, began to evaporate. Isn't that nice? Like it just, we stopped thinking like that, that's how I was. It was like, oh, God's there for war and poverty and children starving in Ethiopia. And what does he care about me and my weight problem and my throwing up problem? And it says, refusing to place God first, we had deprived ourselves of his help. So that tells me what I need to do to get his help. I need to put him first. What does that mean to put him first? It means I need to think, what does God want? Yeah, there's my opinion on it. There's my friends' opinions on it. And then there's, what's God's opinion on the matter? What does God think about it? And to try as best I can to discern, what does God want me to do? And to try to do it. And then a line that to me is comforting, that it says, we saw we needn't always be bludgeoned and beaten into humility. It could come quite as much from our voluntary reaching for it as it could from unremitting suffering. So how do we reach for it? Well, I think we do things to develop like those three ingredients, right? We seek to do God's will. We seek to think less of ourselves, so a concentrated focus on others, and to think of ourselves less. So here's a little thing that I did for humility. I mentioned this before. I'm not an athlete, and I took CrossFit for a while a few years ago. Now, CrossFit, they do this like insanely cruel thing where on the board, like let's say there's 8 people in the class, they write everyone's name in order, first to last, on how well you did. And, I was always at or near the bottom. And I remember thinking, okay, I'm going to be happy when I'm at the bottom, because that means that someone else isn't going to like feel terrible that they're at the bottom. My self-esteem doesn't come from how good I am at CrossFit. I know I suck at CrossFit. My self-esteem comes because I'm beloved by God. So it's fine. I can afford to be last on the list. I can afford to be last. And, ultimately, I would hope that I would say, I can afford to be last off the Titanic. That's what I aspire to just say, it's okay. God's got me, whether it's CrossFit or, life. I remember when COVID started and I live in New Jersey where it was the epicenter when it first started in America. And there was talking about a shortage of ventilators. And I remember thinking, what if I needed a ventilator? And if it was between me and someone else? And I just said, God, I hope that I am able at that moment to say, give it to someone else. I hope that my heart is okay enough that I would do that. That's a goal. But for now, all I have to do is keep my mouth shut when my daughter doesn't have an apartment and doesn't have classes 3 weeks before school starting. That's how I practice it now. Page 76. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful lines. On page, it says, the chief activator of our defects has been self-centered fear. Okay, that's so mainly fear. Primarily fear that we would lose something we already possess or would fail to get something we demanded. And isn't that the basis of all lies, right? We're going to lose something we possess. Sometimes People lie to their sponsors because they're afraid they're going to lose their sponsor if they tell their sponsor the truth, which, by the way, makes their sponsor into an idol. And idols never help us recover. Only God does. Or fear we won't get something we demand. But I'm not supposed to have demands. I can have requests and desires, but not demands. So it says, if we live on a base of unsatisfied demands, we're in a state of continual disturbance and frustration. So how do we have peace? No peace was to be had unless we could find a means of reducing these demands. And that's what the seventh step does. We're humble. We ask God to remove our defects. We give up our right to have everything we want. And I'm just going to close by just going through the 7-step prayer quickly. It says, my creator, I'm now willing that you should have all of me, good and bad. So a couple things there. The term they use for God, my creator. I'm giving myself to God to recreate me, not just make me a little better. I need to be recreated. So I say, take all of me, good and bad. So this line should really help those of us who struggle with shame and guilt and a vague feel like I'm bad. It doesn't matter. We're giving it to God, all of me, the good and the bad. But by now, we shouldn't have vague feelings of bad or shame because we've done an inventory. So it's all there on paper. We've shared it with God and, hopefully with someone who still looks at us with the exact same love that she did before we shared all this. So there's no shame. So we've got it. God, take all of me, good and bad. I pray that you now remove from me every single defect of character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. So I was looking at that line this afternoon and I was thinking, well, all my defects of character stand in the way of my usefulness to God and my fellows. So why am I saying this? Why don't I just say, God, take it all? Like this line didn't make sense to me. And I made 5 calls to try and get someone to help me understand this line. And the first 4, there was no answer. The 5th was, my friend with her proper British accent who just picks up the phone and says, darling, I'm on another call. Can I call you back soon? I said, sure. But I said, okay, God, 5 out of 5, no one's there. Let me just go to you. And so this is what I got from why God might not want to remove everything at once. First, if he did, I would be insufferable. I mean, I feel like I'm just very prideful as it is. Imagine if I were perfect. No, I would have no friends at all. The second thing, I'd stop going to God for help because if he removed all my defects, I wouldn't need him anymore. And God wants me to be in relationship with him. The third thing, I wouldn't appreciate it. It's like, the kid who's given a car when they turn 17 versus the kid who saved up his quarters and dollars from having a paper route. If God's not Santa Claus, where I say, remove all my defects, and he says, yes, your majesty, and they're gone. It doesn't work that way. The fourth thing, I get to work on multiple things at once. So for instance, when I started this program, I was incredibly dishonest. And my work on dishonesty meant that every time I told a lie, I would have to stop myself mid-sentence and say, wait, what I just said, that was a lie. So that also gave me an opportunity to work on my pride. And then the last thing I thought is maybe he does. Maybe he does remove them. But like nature abhors a vacuum, I fail to fill that vacuum with the opposites. So if he removes my selfishness and I fail to practice unselfishness, that unselfishness is just going to come sweeping back. So, so my lesson tonight was, Sometimes maybe we want to go to God before we go to our friends. So we ask God, remove from me every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness to you and my fellows. Grant me strength. That's what I need, right? Strength, power, as I go out from here to do your bidding. Amen. And that is what I just hope and pray that we all can do. Go to God with all of us, the good, the bad, the ugly. Ask him to take all of us, to do with us whatever he wants, to give us whatever he wants. Like, yes, I want that promotion, but thy will, not mine, be done. Yes, I want that boyfriend. No, not me. I'm married, but just as an example, I want that boyfriend. Thy will, not mine, be done. Fred, honey, if you're listening to this, just an example. Um, and ultimately, like my health, let me get better. Let my loved one get better. But thy will, not mine, be done. Help me to be useful. Help me to trust you. And there was a prayer I started saying today. God, help me to always find my joy in you. And with that, I pass.
Thank you.